Good evening. My name is Arvind Verma, and I'm the author of this interesting book titled She Must Not Die. This is a very unusual book, and it is my first attempt to write fiction or fictionalized account of real incidents based on my policing experiences. For a long time, I have been an academic and I have been doing academic writing, uh, published about 12 books and more than 100 articles, most of them focusing upon police in India and criminal justice issues in India. Nevertheless, they are written in a language which is largely scholarly, so it is appealing to only a small select group of people. And I found that to be very disheartening because what I believe is that my words should reach out to a longer group of people. So this became an obsession with me, and I decided to write a slightly different kind of a book, which is still about policing, but written in a story form, uh, describing incidents about various policing experiences that I have. In this book, I narrate a number of stories which deal with real life situations that police officers have to deal with. Generally, what we believe that police have a limited role of controlling crime and maintaining order. But essentially, what I describe is that police officers are problem solvers. They try to address problems that the society brings to them. And for this, they have to adopt a number of creative solutions well within the legal boundaries, but nevertheless using some kind of a shrewdness, some kind of a situational factors, because each problem is very different and each problem requires a new innovative way of dealing with that. So with that intention, I have generated about 11, 12 stories which describe various type of social problems that the police have to confront. For example, a girl eloping with a boy. Now, that may be a small incident, but nevertheless, that can have serious ramifications if the boy or the girl happen to be from different caste, and worse, if they are from different religion, then it can lead to very serious situations. So, confronted with that situation that a boy and a girl want to elope, the police have to really deal with that situation in a very comprehensive manner. Similarly, if there is an incident where police officers generally try to confront or uh, stop or question some people, then the law is a little vague and they have to adopt their discretion in order to make sure that they don't transgress the law and yet try and handle the situation. So there are instances, for example, in one story where a police officer inadvertently, without really realizing, arrests a prominent person, and then how do you try and deal with that? That is the sort of the crux of the story. So that way, I'm trying to bring out many situations that police have to address and handle them with creativity. I'm sure you will enjoy reading them, and more importantly, they will give rise to this idea that in order to work within the system, the criminal justice situation should be thought of in a very different manner. We have to train our police officers to be problem solvers, and that way they will be more meaningful to the role that they are actually playing. So I hope you will enjoy these stories and let me know what you think about them. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Zafina Suresh and I'm the director of IU in India, Indiana University India Gateway. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to our center today. I would like to just add a bit about the work that we do here, and before we have the launch of the book, She Must Not Die, Extraordinary Tales of Policing in India. So since 2014, since our office opened, we have been fostering a lot of higher education connections, doing a lot of faculty, assisting with faculty research, and providing experiential learning for students in India as well as students at Indiana University. And as our objective is to create international education opportunities for Indian students as well as giving them other opportunities to experience IU in India, we do a lot of activities here, and the book launch is one of those activities that we have organized for this month. And I would like to take this opportunity to actually talk a bit about the book launch event. We are honored to have Mr. Prakash Singh this evening as our chief guest. We also have Mr. Ram Sevak Sharma and Rishi Shukla to, as panel discussants. So we warm welcome to you, sir, and for gracing this occasion. IU, is one of those universities which has done India Studies program or India Studies program, which is focused on just research on topics within India. And Professor Arvind Verma is one of the faculty of India Studies as well as Professor of Criminal Justice at Indiana University, Bloomington. Before I hand it over to him, I would like to add that we had dinner today, and we would welcome you all to sort of have dinner before you go. And please do feel free to connect with us if you have any questions or queries after the session. I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate Professor Arvind Verma as well as my best wishes for the book launch. I invite you to this dais. You want to give the book? So as a token of appreciation, we'd like to give these books to Professor Prakash Singh. Ram Sevak Singh.
Thank you, sir.
And Rishi Shukla. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Jafina, and I want to begin by thanking all of you for coming and encouraging me in this wonderful event that I've been looking forward for a very long period of time. I'm particularly grateful to Mr. Prakash Singh. Sir, you are an inspiration, and very, very grateful that you have found time to come today. My old colleague, friend, Ram Sevak Sharma, we have been together for such a long period of time. And interestingly, there are a number of stories in which actually he has been there. So some of the stories obviously will not be total surprise for him. A good number of them he also knows about them. Thank you, Rishi, for taking the time to come all the way from Bhopal. Very obliged, and heard a lot about you the first time that I have met you. And again, very grateful that you have been able to come. I want to thank my other colleagues from police, Rakesh, Manjuri, Sanjay, and Uday Dutt, and so many others, Kashmir, and on and on. Thank you so much. It means a lot to have your own peers come and support you. Similarly, many of my friends from IIT, you are here, and that means a lot. You may probably remember me in IIT doing nothing except playing hockey, but as you can see, I've tried to turn my life around. I'm also very grateful for a number of my so-called students. Actually, I was running a course from IIT on data analysis, and some of my students of that course have come from long distance. They consider themselves to be students, but actually I think we are colleagues, and in some cases they are actually my guru, learned a lot from them. Thank you for gracing this occasion. My friends and my family members are here, my wife and my brothers and my sisters and so many of my nephews also. Again, thank you so much that you have been a real support and come for this occasion. As you may know, in my second avatar of a criminal justice scholar, I might say, or professor, my focus has been on criminal justice and particularly police in India. And I've authored a pretty large number of books and so many articles. And I can say, therefore, on the basis of my research, something which all of you know very well, that criminal justice in India is actually in a terrible shape. I think there's nothing much that I'm trying to bring here. We have serious problems, And the reality of police that comes out is that we have a police force that is heavily politicized to the extent that it is becoming the strong arm of a ruling party rather than strong arm of the state. Um, and on top of that, we have a police force which is following a colonial model, and trying to fit a colonial model into a liberal democracy is itself creating a lot of problems. So therefore we have a system which is sort of mismatched, and which is leading to all kinds of problems, particularly for our officers. Our officers are feared, people don't trust them, they abuse their authority, and corruption is there, and on and on. And most importantly, we don't have a system where officers can be held accountable for their actions. So this is one reality. But there is another reality that I want to bring out today, which is what this book is all about. And that is the reality that police officers everywhere, but particularly in India, face situations that challenge them. They have to address those situations and problems, of course, through lawful authority. You have to invoke the law, but it also involves, shrewdness, and creativity, and innovation. Ordinary social conflicts involving, for example, religion or caste or gender issues, maintaining order, and on, really require you to find some solution which must take into account the political reality and must also maintain a kind of a facade of justice. And I call this, and this is what I defined, that this is essentially what we should see and call as problem solving. And it is this kind of a problem solving that, to my mind, needs introspection and understanding, and also a different approach institutionally, because we have to understand that the police is playing a very different role, and we need to recognize and acknowledge that, and therefore try and do something about it. And it is this newness of the approach that sort of made me think about a different way of approaching it, and also encouraged me to buy this new dress. I thought I should look a little differently, because my brothers and sisters must be horrified that aisa ko kya ho gaya, what is he dressed as. But I thought this would be a new approach that I want to take. One other acknowledgement, that all throughout last 3 decades or so that I have been working as an academic writing is very hard. Sir, you have written so many books, and you are so lucid and so informative in that. But what happens that when you adopt an academic writing and you write a kind of a scholarly book, we can make strong arguments, we can provide some very substantial evidence for what we are trying to achieve, but it has to be done in a way which in academic circles is called like a scholarly approach. And that means you should have references and citations and support all your arguments and do data analysis and on, which makes the book completely unreadable. So my previous books are those where even my best friends, I've asked them, given them the books, I said, "Bhai, pढ़ लो यार, कुछ बताओ कैसा लगा." So ultimately they said, "Time I nahi hai, just bata do so that then I can critique it." So I've been very, very unfortunate in terms of, after writing so much, I don't think my book has been able to, my writing has been able to reach widely, and especially address people who need to hear about what we are trying to say. So it was in that kind of a mode that I was engaging my family. I used to tell them a lot of stories about serial killers and crime and on, which used to terrify my young children. And now that they are grown up, my daughter actually and son, they were more perceptible. So when some of the stories that I have out here are narrated to them, then they pointed out, no, this has meaning. These stories are, of course, they are stories and some kind of situations, but the way that they have been approached suggests a very different kind of a policing, and why don't you write about it? So encouraged by my children and my wife, I decided I might take this leap and try and write a very different kind of a book. And this has been kind of a very difficult process, surprisingly, because writing a story somehow seems to take a real more effort than actually writing an academic kind of an article. I also believe very strongly that, of course, there is a lot of negativity all around us, and our police institution is maligned, and every day there is some criticism. But there are officers, and there are situations, and there are people who are trying to do the best they can. So rather than just trying to criticize what is not being done, why not focus upon things that they are doing successfully, or at least making an attempt to do so. So it was with those kind of thoughts that I decided to develop this particular book, and I decided that I'll write some stories. We think of police as only involved in crime and order maintenance and security issues and maybe sometimes traffic, etc. But no, as I mentioned, police are facing a variety of problems that society has are brought to the police officers to solve, and they have to therefore find some kind of a solution for that. So therefore, police role is actually one of problem solving. Now this has been conceptualized very well by Herman Goldstein when he gave this idea of police as problem solvers. But for India, this is really meaningful. So that's one thing that I want to point out, that this is an important issue. Police are problem solvers. Secondly, we have a constitution, we have a law, and law emphasizes due process for the police. So we have a CRPC that will guide what the police officers should be and what functions they have. But law will only set a boundary. Law cannot define what exactly the police officer has to do, because they have to define, state that in very broad terms. And therefore that leaves a lot of discretion to the police officers. Given a situation, they can act in one or many other ways. And one easy way to try and sort of understand that is to focus upon that police are, of course, law enforcement agency, so they have to enforce the laws. And therefore I always ask my students, how many laws do you think there are whose enforcement is done by the police and whose violation can actually lead you for some kind of a police action, that they can arrest you or they can question you or something? And the answer to this simple question of how many laws there are is surprisingly very, very difficult to answer. Because there is actually no real count. There was a Canadian law commission that was entrusted with this task. And Canada has very similar situation with India. They are a parliamentary democracy and on and on. And believe it or not, they reached a figure of something like 40,000 and then gave up, saying that no, we cannot really enumerate how many laws there are in which situations that can be enforced. So think about it. There are so many laws, and as police officers, we focus only upon a few limited ones. Property and theft and dacoity and murder and assault and on and on. Maybe now there's some cyber laws that are coming up. But there are laws, for example, of, you can interpret laws in terms of enforcement for enforcement purposes, money laundering, money lending, and Bonded Labor Act or Minimum Wages Act or on and on, which affect people in a very, very different manner. So we as police officers essentially choose which laws we are going to enforce. And that gives us tremendous power. And it also emphasizes very clearly, which I've written in my another book, that politicization of the police is natural because police are essentially playing politics. We decide which law to enforce and how to enforce in what particular circumstances. Of course, there may be some pressure and some other situations, but by and large, if you look into all the thousands and millions of crimes that are being registered, we decide how that should be done and how which ones to pick and choose. If we realize this particular reality, then we have to think about training our officers in a different way. Train our officers for problem solving, train our officers to use their discretion in a proper manner, and if we can do that, then that is going to give rise to a new kind of a criminal justice system, which is going to be a little different.
So I'm going to come back to this issue a little later and emphasize how my stories are trying to bring this out. I want to acknowledge that all the stories are real and truthful accounts of episodes that have happened. Of course, I have camouflaged them, I have taken some liberty as a narrator to mix some events, change the sequences and on and on. But my colleagues from Bihar will probably recognize a few of them because they have happened out there. And through these stories, again, then a broader conceptualization of criminal justice is what I'm trying to suggest. A new form of policing is what I'm trying to conceptualize and develop. Again, these are not stories which are very peculiar only to me. Each one of you, at least all the officers who are there, you've handled hundreds and hundreds of such episodes. You've done them in a regular manner. It's just that you have not narrated them, you have not stated them, but you've handled them exactly as I sort of narrate out here. So it's again not something which is exclusive to me or something very, very peculiar. This is very common, and this is what I want to emphasize. I will take the liberty of identifying one of my, the first lady police officer from Bihar, Manjari, and when she came to Patna, I'm told, Manjari, that the streets will be packed trying to look at you going to the office, first lady officer. Sorry, I wasn't there, I joined later, so it's again a fictional account. So when we were in a small district, rural district, this lady officer joined the district and immediately attracted a huge amount of attention. Lady officer, smartly dressed, riding a motorcycle, with a revolver on her sort of side, going around. This was a novelty, and there were people who were thronging all around to see her. Unfortunately, as it happens, that young officers generally have a attitude of acting like one of those. Now, of course, there's another movie I haven't seen that called Singham, or one of those tough police officers. Bachchan used to play that role very well in some of his movies. So that was the path that she sort of adopted when going around, and some of the people that she beat up on the street, some young guys hanging in around a girls' school, she beat them up. She chased some guy, and then a revolver was recovered from him, and then the whole town sort of applauded that particular episode. So this was something that was sort of being built up, and as a consequence, most of my young officers really admired her, because that's what they really wanted to do. We did a comparative study of Japan, Canada, and India, where we asked officers why they joined the police department. It turns out majority of the police officers join the police service because they think they want to do public service. But they also join because of this status, this whole idea that you are a good guy beating up the bad guy, and on and on. So all my officers were really admiring her, and they were very, very frustrated with me. Yeah, officer, I have due process, and follow the law, and go soft, and look up for all the evidence, all those things that really something that didn't really matter to them. Unfortunately, as happens, if you start following this particular path, then things start going wrong. You're obviously abusing your authority, and then complaints start coming in. So we started receiving a lot more complaints, where sometimes she arrested somebody, a petrol dealer, on complaint that he's not measuring the petrol that he's giving to the car correctly. Which was so, there was no evidence, but this guy spent time in lockup and had to get bail outside that. She even beat up an old lady because somebody complained that this old lady is torturing her daughter-in-law. So, again, there's very little evidence. So we were getting a kind of getting into a situation where we had to counsel her again and again. Please, you are a senior officer and you need to follow the law. But youthful exuberance, I think that doesn't really matter much. And then one day, a serious complaint happened. So we had a local election, and the ruling party was obviously likely to win that election. But the district president of that ruling party
made sure that all the arrangements are sort of strong, and he was putting his prestige there because hopefully he wanted to probably move on the ladder in the ruling party. So they were trying to do a lot of things, and this was before the Session era. So elections in Bihar were still very, very combative, even though it may be a by-election. So the DM, who is my colleague, and we both worked very hard to make all the arrangements and look and supervise and deploy the forces and make sure that the elections go smoothly. And that is when on the election day things were going very smoothly, and suddenly the town inspector called me, sir, madam has arrested this president. So I said, okay, what is the charge? Sir, I don't know, madam came and said, police station, and she's gone away. So we both got very alarmed. We started inquiring from other sources and trying to find where she is. But in a very nonchalant manner, she just put this guy in the police station and drove off. Now, of course, we both realized that this is a very serious situation. The district president of the ruling party being stationed at the police station is no easy matter, and we are going to be getting a lot of calls. In fact, some calls started coming, the local media picked up, and the DM had to sort of adroitly maneuver and trying to find out what's happening. So we quickly tried to locate this officer and sent her a message, please come quickly, come back. And we brought her to the to her office and said, what happened? Why did you arrest him? And she said, sir, election booth ke paas, he was going asking people to vote. I said, well, he's not standing, he's not a candidate. And how far was it from the polling booth? And what was he really saying? Have you filed any reports? There was no report, nothing of that sort. So when we questioned her, then it realized that there was hardly any evidence. And then, of course, she also probably realized and came into tears. We didn't really want to we have to balance that we should not really bring any harm to our young officer. She has a long career, but we also didn't want to have a situation where we have a wrongful arrest on our part. So we both debated what we should be doing, and ultimately we decided that the best way is that we should release him. But then the DM pointed out that if we say that we are releasing him, then we are acknowledging that we have arrested him, and that can later on boomerang upon him. So we have to find some other methodology. So then we debated and said, okay, we can do that. So I went to the police station, and this is what I write in my book. Upon entering the police station, I acted surprised on seeing the local president sitting on the chair. Fortunately, the SHO was shrewd and had not put any restraints upon him. Bhagwanji, what are you doing here in the police station? I asked in all my naivety. Sir, madam has arrested me and brought me here, he stated almost in tears. Arrested? For what? I feigned my ignorance. I don't know, sir, he also protested. I asked the SHO sternly, Ajit, what did the madam arrest him for? Sir, I also don't know. I was not here when she came and told the constable to sit him in the office. He was making clear that he had nothing to do with this sordid affair. Sir, I have not done anything. The president began finding his voice too. Of course, why would you do anything wrong? I tried to reassure him. But what did madam say for bringing you here? I probed further. Sir, I was walking in the street and she suddenly came in a jeep. She got down, asked me to sit behind, and then brought me here. He skipped over all the related details that probably had taken place. So I decided to play my trump card now. Did she say that she is arresting you? I asked lightly. Oh no, sir. She did not say what I have done. He focused upon his innocence. Then she did not arrest you, I clarified in simple tone. What do you mean, sir? She brought me here. He looked puzzled. See, if she had arrested you, she must inform you about the reasons for arrest. And then would have either placed some handcuff or tied a rope or put some restraint and on, put you in the lockup. I described all the serious consequences of how arrests are made. Then why did she bring me here? She was not really confused. Oh, for your safety. I jumped to the logical conclusion. You know the opposition party, they know that they are losing the election, so they want to create some ruckus. And they were trying to sort of get you involved. Oh yes, sir, I know that they will not win the election, we will win the election. Sir, then I am not under arrest. He still did not understand why I was sitting in the police station. Of course you are not under arrest. I said as if for such an absurd situation. Then can I go home? He really wanted to make sure he had his freedom. Yes.
Let me drop you home, I now offered consolation. No, sir, my driver has brought the car and standing outside. Now he began to assert his position as an important VIP. So we sent him home, came back. The DM fielded all the questions that were coming from the media and from headquarters and everybody, and trying to somehow maneuver and make sure that the word arrest does not happen. There's some kind of misunderstanding and something for his protection, and media is highly unnecessarily playing this up and on and on. So finally, by the evening, things sort of quietened down. We asked the lady officer to lie low for a few days and not speak to any journalists. The matter was diffuse, and since the ruling party won the elections, and any grievances against her also were not articulated by the party. So the local district president even turned gracious and commended the young officer for enforcing the law uniformly. So I want to bring this idea that a different legal ingenuity is needed in many of these situations. And let me tell you one other very interesting story where this was also adopted. So I've titled this story Ganga Yamuna Tehzeeb. We know that in most of the old towns that we have in our country, there is a mixed Hindu-Muslim population and other communities. And invariably, there are problems when religious festivals are organized. In this case, there was an old tomb, and there was a water tank around that where the processions would be taken and all the immersion will be done. And around that area, the tajiyas would be buried. And then one day, Muharram and Ganesh Chaturthi, Hindu and Muslim festival both fell on the same day. So we had to prepare really very, very carefully and supervise. And what is typically done is to call all the people who are putting up the pandal and the tajiyas and sort of give them, find out how many, what is the size and how many people are involved, and then we sequence them so that they don't come into clash. So very careful sort of a sequence of time has to be maintained in order that things go very, very smoothly. So we did that, and then of course the commissioner and IG and everybody's involved. So we shared our plans and discussed that, and then we got all the undertakings for all these particular people who are going to be involved in the celebration. And we said, oh, okay, things look really good. Suddenly, 2 days before, I get this call from my Inspector Usman. Sir, Radheshyam Group is not accepting the time and schedule for the procession, and his action has now provoked everyone to reschedule all the events and processions. He minced no words in his report. Now, this guy was one who was a kind of an emerging politician in that district. So we found that the emergence of how many people you can bring around and you can create a ruckus and sort of combat with the administration. That gives him the media coverage, which makes him move up the ladder. So we knew that this guy is a potential troublemaker, and of course that's what he did. So what happened? I asked Usman directly. Sir, he claims that the auspicious time for the puja and the procession is 3 hours before what we have scheduled for him. This is deliberate, since it will clash with the Muharram celebrations, he explained. Moreover, when I refused to make any changes, he accused me of favoring the Muslims and being anti-Hindu. Usman was red in the face and almost stammering in narrating these accusations. Now, Usman is a very interesting character. We all knew that on Tuesday, he would donate laddus to the local Hanuman temple. So there was the story that when he was a toddler, he felt seriously ill, and one sadhu told his mother that you should pray to Lord Hanuman and donate laddus, and that will keep him healthy. So his mother had been doing that all throughout, and after that she made sure that his son also follows. So we all knew that Usman, being a Muslim, still every Tuesday he would send laddus to the local Hanuman temple. So for him to be accused of on this religious ground seemed obviously very, very absurd. Well, anyway, we had this problem, so we immediately called a meeting at the DM's office and called everybody and decided to see what is this issue. And obviously, Radheshyam was the one who said, sir, this is an inauspicious time, we have checked with my Pandit, and my procession has to start 2 hours earlier, which we knew will be a problem. So at this moment, the DM rose to the occasion and saved the day for all of us. Because what he did was he questioned the Panchang itself. As known, the Panchang is a detailed Hindu calendar which takes into account 5 factors: the day of the week, Var, Tithi or lunar day, Nakshatra or the constellation, Yog and Karma. This calendar is calculated based on various aspects of astrology like the moon phases, positions of stars and planets. Over the years, other important concepts such as Rasi, Animasha, Rahu Kal, Amrut Kal, Vajra Kal, Gulika Kal, Abhijit, Yamangam, sunrise, sunset, moonrise, moonset, all these have, with specific geographical locations, have become part of the calculations. So given the large number of Dev and Devis that we have in the Hindu pantheon, there is hardly any unanimity about what is the correctness of any one astrological derivative. The DM cashed upon this broad-based interpretation of what determines an auspicious time for a particular event. Call your Pandit and let him explain how he has done the calculations. The DM responded strongly. So when the Pandit came, Panditji, how did you calculate that the auspicious time for the puja falls in the afternoon? The DM wasted no time in confronting him. Sir, based on the Vikrami calendar, I followed the table and taken account of the movement of planets to determine the most auspicious time. He stuttered, clearly overwhelmed and nervous in facing the district officials. Show me how you've done the calculations, the DM ordered sternly. The DM had many questions about Rana, half lunar day, Yog, lunisolar day, almanac, and also the Panchang Pujan. These are standard foundational blocks of the Panchang, and the Pandit managed to answer with some trepidation. However, the DM was not easily giving in and had questions about Sade Sathi, Rahu Kalam, Joghatiya. We listened in amazement as the DM quizzed him about all these terms and had him verify from the almanac. It wasn't long before the Pandit had been tied in knots and was stammering in his explanations. You are aware that the Panchang is based on Ghati, old time division, and not on the Indian Standard Time? The DM was now leading him towards admitting the error of his calculations. Have you examined the time for the Udvek Chogatiya? He asked now in full command. No, sir, the Pandit answered in full bewilderment. You should know that it is inauspicious time for any day activity, the DM pressed. Yes, sir, but the Amrit Chogatiya is the one that I selected. He tried to sort of still make a desperate attempt to interpret his, assert his interpretation. You need to see whether the early afternoon time of the procession will fall during the Udvek Chogatiya. And if so, it will create problems for everyone. The DM was in full command. When the district administration worked out the schedule, I took account of the Panchang and ensured that the processions take place during these auspicious time periods. Now he was challenging the Pandit and others to question his knowledge. So, obviously, with the DM's assertion, he stuck to the old timetable, and that's how the all the processions were taken out. Of course, Radhe Sham did try to delay taking out the procession and proceed slowly through the streets, but some undercover officers kept reminding the participants that Gop Chogatiya will begin by 9 p.m. and the immersion had to be done before that. So belief in stars and constellations was stronger than in Radhe himself, and his followers quickened their pace and reached the time before the deadline. So things passed very gracefully and peacefully, and the commissioner was gracious enough to commend us and also gifted a gift wrap Panchang to me and the DM. Through the story, what I want to assert is that in India, we face a lot of local traditions and a lot of beliefs and social customs and on and on. And therefore, it is always useful to find some solution based upon some of this approach rather than a pure interpretation of the law. I'll go with one more story and let's see how much time we have. This is a story about patrolling. I'm sure many of my colleagues will remember this. So what happens that whenever politicians and senior officers have to assert that they are strong and tough on the crime, they want police to look tough and act tough and above all be visible. So the demand is that you must patrol very strong. So we had a new chief minister come to the state. He was imposed by the center, so he didn't have much of local standing, but nevertheless he was brought in to be the chief minister. And of course the first thing they do is, after taking oath and settling down, they call all the officials and the usual statement is made that I want you to work honestly and with integrity and maintain order and develop the state. I'm not going to brook any kind of a nonsense. I'm going to give you full freedom. There won't be any kind of an interference, but I want to see results. I want you guys to control crime. I want you to be respectful to the citizens, and I want to make sure that people feel safe. So I'm going to come and check how well you're doing, and I'm going to check how well you're doing your patrolling. Now, what is interesting is that this is a uniform sort of a approach everywhere. That if you want to show that policing is being done properly, then you do patrolling properly. You should have more people patrol on the streets. In a remarkable experiment called the Kansas City Patrol Experiment, it was found that patrolling actually has no impact. In the Kansas City, they divided the city into three sort of random police beats. In one random set of random beats, they increased patrolling. Another, they decreased patrolling. And third, they just left it as that. And they ran this experiment for roughly 16 months, a long period of time. And after 16 months, when they analyzed all kinds of data, crime, citizen complaint, media reports, response time, and all the data that can be collected, what they found was very, very surprising, that there is no difference. It doesn't matter if you increase patrolling, it doesn't matter if you decrease patrolling, things just remain the same. But of course, nobody has heard about the Kansas City, at least they don't follow, and most of the police departments abroad also don't follow. That's a different thing. So anyway, after hearing from the Chief Minister that we want to be tough on crime and we want to have good patrolling, so we put in more officers. The DGP was kind enough to give in another small set of officers. So we put them on the street, and for a few days we were all supervising and running around and making sure that patrolling is being done in a visible way. And after a few days, things just fizzled down. How much you can ask the person to stand tall and straight and on, and slowly the shoulders will droop in. And very quickly, patrolling started fizzling down. The DGP also withdrew some of the officers that he had given, so we are running short, and we are trying to manage the best way that we could do. And therefore, at one night after dinner, the CM called the DG and said, "Aaiye, meri gaadi mein baithiye, chale aapki patrolling dekhein kaisi ho rahi hai." So he went around the city, driving around with the DGP in an unmarked car. And that's when one of the officers called me and said, "Sir, CM and the DGP are out there checking patrolling." So we tried to run very quickly and got into our cars and sort of find ways to come in front of the CM's car. But it so happened that they took a sort of a tour of the city and probably never saw even a single patrol officer. So the CM was still generous. He went back and said, "Well, I think people are feeling safe and secure. I found families and women also walking the street and coming out to the picture theatre. So I think people are feeling secure, but you should have more patrolling." Of course, the DGP was furious. Immediately called us and fired, and what the hell is going on? Who is patrolling? What are you guys doing? And on and on. And I tried to reason, saying that we have done an analysis. We know when crimes happen, where they happen, and that's why we are trying to patrol. And what the hell? Patrolling should also be visible. You should have police officers visible on the street because that gives them confidence. So that was a good advice. So what we did was we put officers on all the crossroads of the main crossroads of the street. So starting from those of you who know the city will know that from the railway station to the Dak Bangla Chowraha to this Chowraha to that Chowraha, everywhere we had some officers. And of course, patrolling has to be done in 3 shifts because we want to have them all the time. So that means for each unit, you have to have sort of 3 times the number. So we could draw wherever we could and try to do that. And actually that had a very good impact because now people like judges, high court judges and prominent citizens and senior retired officers who drive in their own chauffeured cars could just see and they saw police officers at every nook and corner whenever they were going. And that of course, immediately boomeranged. The president didn't make any difference to the crime was happening, but the positive citizen feedback was still very positive. But police wala kya karega? Crime ho hi jata hai, but they are there, they are standing there.
But one day, some things really happened. We had a leader of opposition, a former chief minister, come out of the railway station on a rickshaw with a companion. Reaching the railway station late at night from a suburban train, he quietly came out with his companion and took a rickshaw. He had a blanket wrapped around his shoulders, a monkey cap on his head, and thick glasses that covered most of his face. He had a rusted tin box for his possessions and a bag loosely hung over the shoulder. The companion, though younger, also had a small bundle of clothes in a black cotton bag dangling from his knees. The two proceeded to his residence some distance away from the railway station in a rickshaw. However, the vigilant officers, told to be on the lookout for suspicious characters, accosted them coming out from the railway premises. His dhoti kurta and scraggy beard fitted the profile of dangerous offenders. And as would happen, he was immediately coming out of the railway station, he was accosted. People came and said, "Who are you?" And he didn't want to tell his name. So they became even more suspicious. So they, body sir, they dappa kholo, dikhao bag mein kya hai, and on. And they didn't find anything. Then they lectured him. "Aap raat mein aise ghumte rehte hain. Somebody will steal your bag, your box, and then you'll come to the police and make us work harder. Ghar mein kyun nahi rehte? Kyun raat mein ghumte rehte hain?" So after that crossroad, when he went to the next crossroad, there was another vigilant party. They also stopped him. They also had the same lesson for him. Kyun raat mein ghum rahe hain? Kya tamasha kar rahe hain aap? Unfortunately for him, he accosted 2-3 such crossroads. And there was also a patrolling party that we had involved. So the patrolling party also came and they also accosted him. Kahan ghum rahe hain? He was lectured and sort of humiliated again and again. So when finally he reached home, the first thing he did was, of course, to call the DGP. He woke the DGP at night, and of course, what to say. So the DGP got even more angry and called the SP. So woken up, and it took time for the SP to sort of wake up and find that there's a call from the DG. It takes about a minute or two, in which the DG got even more angry. हमारी बात भी नहीं सुनते हैं. Fired by the DGP. What the hell is happening? क्या कर रहे हैं आप लोग? कुछ देखते भी नहीं हैं, and on and on. Go to him and apologize and देखिए कुछ करिए क्या कर रहे हैं. So we immediately sent information to the police line to try to find out who were the patrol officers in those areas. उनका roster निकालिए और तुरंत जो है orderly room में बुलाइए morning में, we'll take them. And then went to the politician. Meanwhile, one smart officer who was sort of following this quietly told the SP, "Sir, the politician had a bodyguard and he was not there with him." Why wasn't there? Sir, a bodyguard को तो उन्होंने गांव में भेज दिया है, and the bodyguard is actually supervising his farm and looking after his animals and so on and so forth. So he was not there with him. So I thought this would be useful information. Very, very happy. And he immediately went to the politician bodyguard. SP was speaking authoritatively in a firmer voice. No, he really had an emergency, so I had to give him the permission. The politician is now on a weaker wicket. "Sir, these men take advantage of your generous nature and violate the rules." The SP played the stroke too. "I will suspend him and give you a bodyguard who will always stay with you." SP was now pressing his advantage. "Oh, please, do not suspend him. He took my permission." The politician was lost and realizing that this could lead to information about misuse of his bodyguard. "No, sir, he cannot leave without permission. He should have come to me so that I could ensure that you are very well protected." SP was in full command. This would not have happened if this bodyguard was there with you. SP was now playing his full hand. "Oh, please excuse him this time." The seasoned politician had been deflated and was completely on the defensive. "No, sir, I cannot. The CM is going to be asking for an explanation and is very concerned at this lapse." SP knew that the politician will have to tone down his complaint. "Oh, I will speak to the CM and tell him that this is a minor matter." The politician quickly grasped the chance for a way out of his shenanigans. "Sir, the press will make a headline of this issue." SP continued to press his advantage. "Oh, let me speak to them now." He relented further. So the journalist hanging around was summoned and told that the SP is holding an inquiry into the incidents, he'll be taking action, and the politician made it clear that he is satisfied with the actions of the SP and has full faith in his leadership. His backpedaling diffused the matter, and even though some newspapers carried the report, it was confined to a small section within the pages. The matter was naturally brought to the attention of the CM, but he was surprised to hear praise of the local police and the SSP in particular. However, the CM saw this as an opportunity to score a point against the opposition party. In his own press briefing, he pointed out that the patrolling was now ubiquitous and officers were not sleeping but actively doing their duty. Furthermore, they were checking anyone irrespective of the status and position. But the CM was astute and called the DGP to direct the police officers that they should differentiate between citizens and criminals. So that was the last point that he made that. Can I just quickly have one more short story? And this is also very interesting and presents another very, very interesting phenomena. So please give me another 5-7 minutes. I'll try and complete that very quickly. So the story is titled Theft at Raj Bhavan. Now what we know that crimes in high places invariably become very serious offences. Not only is the victim, who's a high profile person, able to draw the intervention of senior officers, but also demand quick action by the investigating officers. This is inevitable given the elitism which is prevalent in the Indian society. The history of privilege garnered by the people based upon their caste and relation to rulers and financial clouds makes them feel entitled to expect official discretion in their favor. And I found it very amusing that there was a very similar incident in UP, sir, where one politician's buffalo was stolen. And I'm told that whole district officials had to sort of go and investigate this case of missing buffalo or theft of buffalo. So here is how it began. Sir, please come quickly. The urgency in the voice of my quivering deputy superintendent was genuine and caught my attention. What is the matter? Sir, there has been a theft at Raj Bhavan and Rajpal sir is very angry. He has asked me to call the DGP to the Raj Bhavan. He said, me too. What has been stolen? So the governor's daughter has reported that her marriage sari has been stolen. He informed with great concern. The governor's daughter was recently married in a glittering function at Raj Bhavan and had just returned home after spending some time with her in-laws. Has she searched and looked into a closet and boxes? I said, feeling a little relieved that it was not a major break-in. I think so, but please hurry, the DGP is arriving soon. So we rushed to the governor's house, and there was of course a convoy of siren blazing police cars, and almost all the senior officers of the city were beginning to assemble in their own glittering vehicles studded with flags and insignias. The one star on the number plate indicated that the DIG of the range had reached the Raj Bhavan, and behind him a 2-star vehicle pulling in announced that the IG had also arrived to mark his presence. The DGP with 3 stars studded on the vehicle had not yet arrived, but the DIG, CID and even the special IG branch and I think also the railway SP pulled in simultaneously. This was a VIP case and all police officers were there to ensure that the sari theft was professionally investigated. I heaved a sigh of relief, for I had beaten all these cars and I was in the front and I could be seen to be taking command. Kya hua? What happened? How can a thief get into the Raj Bhavan? The DIG was quick to mark his presence before the zonal IG. Perhaps he also noticed that the DGP's car was pulling in. It must have been stolen. The IG now asserted his command. He was unhappy in his present position and overlooked for leading the CID that he had been coveting. Now it was time for him to display his proficiency in investigating an important crime. He was determined to make that clear to the DGP who joined the group. Man says she has searched everywhere. The ADC to the governor, a young strapping IPS officer, added helpfully. He had maneuvered his posting that came with a large house and perks of office. Now it was his time to make sure that the top brass knew he was the conduit to the governor. She also observed that she has kept a sari in a closet on a hanger. I added, based upon some vague feedback given by officers. Anyway, the DG came and very angry and said, okay, what have you been doing? And we assured that we have brought the forensic team and we have a team of investigators. We are going to be dusting the rooms and looking and asking all the questions. So we all trooped in into the Bhavan to meet the governor. The governor was, of course, a very seasoned politician. This was probably his second or third or fourth governorship. So we should not have been really worried. While watching the anxious faces, he grinned and smiled softly. Bhai, mere ghar mein chori kaise ho sakti hai? I've lived in governor's mansion for more than a decade and never such incident has taken place. I'm sure she has misplaced it with hundreds of saris she has or left it back at her in-laws. But my wife is distraught and unfortunately usually suspects some of the servants. He kept talking. She can buy a new sari, but both mother and daughter now want the old sari worn on the wedding day. So please, some of you go and speak to them and get back the sari. He suggested a viable solution. So we quickly formed a team and we went inside and set up a kind of a control room. And I went inside and took my inspector Muhammad Aslam with him. I knew he was the best officer I had for this delicate investigation. The ladies had been informed about the visit and they were fully prepared with the stories. The daughter and her husband and one niece were sitting on the adjoining sofa. The guy looked decent, though a little unsettled around his new in-laws. The narration was simple. She had worn the sari during the reception on the wedding day and then kept it in the second shelf of the cupboard. She left the Raj Bhavan the next day and after her honeymoon she had returned the evening before. All her clothes were still in the cupboard, including many of her personal items and even some jewelry. The sari was kept on top of all the other clothes and she had personally seen it before leaving the house. We dutifully examined the cupboard that showed no signs of breakage. It had a lock, but she informed that all the closets and cupboards are generally kept unlocked. Who would steal from here? Her mother was more vociferous. She complained that the governor would not change the old staff even when most are lazy and never work properly. She had to personally supervise every part of the large house and look after the kitchen too. The servants just did not know how to maintain this house and kept everything in order. So she said that because of the wedding, some other people had to be brought in for all the cleaning and maybe some of them may have stolen the sari. So we began checking all the possible places, dusted the cupboards with powder to search for fingerprints and started setting up a control room and started looking into the statements of who was where and who was coming in and out. At this moment, Muhammad stepped in. In a quiet voice, he asked the particulars for the sari. Color, design, photos that may have been taken. He quietly asked where the sari was bought and looked into some of the other photographs. So he made a quick note of that and said, okay, we'll set up a control room. We started looking into that. So we had a control room and all the officers started taking statements and searching various possible places. In the late evening, I got a call from Muhammad. Sir, we have found the sari. Where? Who stole it? I could not hide my excitement. Sir, we found it in the laundry room among some bed sheets piled in the corner. He informed and also asked me to come to the Raj Bhavan. By the time I reached the house, the excitement was visible. Everyone had heard about the recovery and were praising the police for their quick detection. It was time to meet the governor who was with the family, very visibly pleased. Great work. I think the sari must have got entangled with the bed sheets and sent to the laundry room by mistake. Fortunately, it was not washed, otherwise it would have been spoiled. It was clearly in good mood. The daughter and mother were also looking happy and thanking Uncle Muhammad for being compared with Bollywood heroes. So I thought it was time to acknowledge the hero and inform the governor that I'm going to recommend a promotion for him before he retires the next month. The governor graciously nodded and mentioned that he would recommend to the CM too. We were served tea and biscuits and everything else, and we went back in triumph. The story actually ends here, but the next morning I got an unexpected call from the daughter. Angaji, I'm not sure if this is the right sari, she spoke earnestly. My heart sank and I thought the problem is going to come back again. Why? It has the same color and design, I tried to reason with her. Yes, it is exactly the same type, but it is not the one I wore on the wedding day. She continued to seem a little unsure of herself. How do you know that? I tried to press and put an end to any further discussion. Uncle, now the G had disappeared from her voice, which suggested confrontation. Uncle, the sari's blouse piece is still there, she exclaimed. So what? I feigned ignorance of women's apparels. See, the sari comes with an extra piece of cloth to make the matching blouse. I had it cut and taken out, though I did not use for the blouse. Oh, perhaps the tailor did not cut the piece. It's the same sari we all saw for ourselves. I tried to cut her arguments. No, the sari cannot be worn with any additional piece of cloth attached to it, she answered very sharply. She was adamant and insisted that it was not her wedding sari. I continued to show my ignorance of women's clothing and requested her to check again and see the fit and wash and everything. Still angry, she decided not to pursue the matter. Already her father had been irritated and she had experienced annoyance amongst all the family who thought she had made up the story. Later I called Muhammad to my residence and served him tea, informing about the forthcoming promotion that he was being given. I then told him about the call from the daughter and quietly asked him, how did you think of this solution? At first he denied, kept saying that the sari was indeed mixed with the bed sheets and taken to the laundry room. But when I persisted, he said it was rather simple. He sent an officer to the shop, bought the similar sari. It was not difficult for the shopkeeper to remember the sari since the governor's daughter herself had come to the shop to make the purchase. Fortunately, another sari exactly the same was available, which he then got planted in the laundry room. Sir, he spoke earnestly, this was the best solution. We would have never recovered the sari, and some innocent man would have been sent to jail unnecessarily. He was pointing to the harsh truth of policing. Now everyone is happy, and you have already compensated me by giving this promotion. He was now enjoying himself. What if someone comes to know about it? I was still worried about the problem reviving itself and wondering how the DG, CM, and governor would react. Sir, the shopkeeper will not say a word, and no one else knows about this. I was still apprehensive about this boy. I heard her call and went and convinced her. He tried to reassure me. Apparently, after speaking to me, the daughter called Muhammad and complained it was not the right sari. However, he went to the Raj Bhavan and showed a curry stain on the pallu as evidence that the sari was worn during the dinner celebrations. Still unconvinced, she nevertheless accepted the explanation. So how did the stain come on the sari? I persisted. Sir, that is another story. He was not going to tell the spill the beans. I believe most of the stories are a little light-hearted, kind of a commonplace, and on and on. Some of them are a little dark, and they point to some of the more challenging situations that the police have to face. But through these stories, what I'm trying to do is again have this important lesson. The criminal justice system that we have today is unable to deliver the justice. Think about in all of these situations, the police are expected to register an FIR and investigate and collect evidence and prosecute and on and on. Find some different way. And in this, in our system, working through a liberal democratic society, you have to hear all the voices, you have to hear all the concerns that are brought in, and then try to sort of weave your way and find very creative methods to try and address these particular problems. As I mentioned, law will only set a boundary and give a lot of discretion to the officers. Police have to use that discretion wisely and in the larger good interest, for which of course we have mechanisms and we can try and do that. But we have to acknowledge that the police are indeed solving problems created by the social political system that we have, and they are trying to find some creative ways of addressing those problems. My urge is that we need to recognize this particular role of the police, which is not at all sort of known. And once we acknowledge it, then we need to train our officers and help them develop their functions and problem-solving abilities. And for that, we obviously need a very different kind of organizational change also. So a new kind of a conceptualization of how we must police India, given the socio-economic political reality we have, is something that has to be conceptualized. And I hope through my book, I want to raise this issue and look forward to your criticism and comments. Thank you so much.